Hello. In today's video, I just wanted to talk to you a little bit about something that I did on the weekend. And it wasn't particularly fun, it wasn't particularly exciting. It was, I sat down and I did a little bit of work on my business. And it was working on this part of my business that often gets neglected, which is the tracking and the numbers on my client results. Tracking results when it comes to marketing is vitally important, and when it comes to the results for my clients, I've kind of got tracking spreadsheets set up that I've sort of put together over time, and the numbers are there, so we can actually track aspects of them, but there's a part of it that I probably neglect in some ways. There's aspects to it that have just been left out. Now, the reason that we need to be tracking these particular numbers is that at times those numbers tell a story. So just to give you a bit of a concrete example, if we think about a website, you've got people going to that website, and it could be hundreds, could be thousands, lots of people go to that website. Now, at the other end of that website, they will usually come out as a lead of some sort. And there's usually two ways that that'll happen. One will be, they'll be either a phone call, that they picked up the phone and called, or there was a web form that they filled out. Now, from that point of essentially a website visitor to lead, there's a proportion of those that actually go ahead. That's essentially the rate. It's what we call the conversion rate. Now, conversion rate is usually it is the number of leads divided by the amount of traffic, and that'll give us a percentage. And often we'll look at that as, okay, this website's converting at 2%, or this website's converting at 8%. Now, I typically like to see my sites converting somewhere between 7 and 12% is a kind of thing I aim for. Now, sometimes a website will be converting less than that. It might be at 4% or 3%. When this happens, I've got to figure out, well, why isn't that happening? So up until now, what happens then is usually it's at that point I look at the data and I look to try and find out, well, what's going on with this website? And really the only numbers we have is, at the moment that we've been recording, is the number of, the amount of traffic, and then what the conversion rate is. But we haven't really mapped out the stages outside of that. So what we want to start measuring is the little mini steps across that journey. Now, for phone calls, it's quite simple. They basically get on the site, they click a button, and then make a phone call. So those ones are quite easy to track. With a web form, however, different sites are a little bit different. So with some sites, we've got one main web form, like a request a quote form, and in other sites we might have multiple. There might be a request a quote form plus a info pack or a pricing guide or something like that. So we've got different web forms. Now, with each of those web forms as well, there's a number of stages to those web forms. So firstly, there's the button which says get a quote, which they click on. That's obviously one point. How many people who get to the website click that get a quote button? That's one thing we can measure. Then once they click that get a quote, they basically get shown the form. We can then just have a look at, well, how many people started that form? How many of them actually went ahead and put their details in that first question in that form? And that's essentially the rate of from seeing the form to actually starting the form. We can look at that number. And then finally, we can also look at how many from starting the form actually completed the form and submitted that. And then we can see how many of those actually went ahead. So that's a whole nother aspect of conversion, where that form has multiple parts to it, and we can actually measure and track each of those individually to see how can we actually improve each of those steps. So yeah, what I did on the weekend was really getting clear on how we can start to measure and adjust these things in our client business to make sure that we're not just focusing on the overall metric of the conversion rate of the website, but we're actually starting to measure the site to form conversion, the form, or basically from form view to form start conversion, and then from form start to completion, and then that'll give us our overall total. And then beyond that, there's even more aspects of conversion, let's say from a web form lead to actually answering the phone and talking to someone. So actually getting to that point where it's a genuine conversation and not just a name and email. And then perhaps from that conversation, how many of those then go to actually book a formalized appointment or request a quotation, depending on the industry. And then even when you actually put forward a appointment, how many then actually show up to that appointment and do the appointment? And then at the appointment, how many of those actually go ahead and request a quotation formally and a proposal sent? And what proportion of those are then actually accepted? So walking through step by step each of these points is going to give us a much better snapshot of how the business is performing and give us a much better idea of how the marketing is then leading to those sales. So that's the thing I worked on the weekend. It's been something I've been trying to find time for a long time, but I'm really excited to start to implement some of this to get even better results for our clients. Thanks for watching.